Tabletopped will start after the following messages. Welcome back, everyone, to Tabletop. Today we are sitting down at the crafting table to talk about homebrewing environmental procedures. And I got all the regulars with me, but just in case you don't know them, let's introduce them. Who am I looking at right now?
Daniel, my favorite environment, rivers.
Ooh.
Hey, it's Franco. My favorite environment, the beach.
Hey, it's Shade, and it's okay you forgot about me. Memory's ephemeral.
All right, cool.
right.
Call back. Let's do it. What are environmental procedures, Franco? Why don't you give us a little taste?
Well, procedures are sort of like, I feel like I don't know why it's so hard to describe. It's like you know when you're like told out of nowhere by your GM to roll initiative,
Yeah.
and then suddenly everything is like 6 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a procedure. Combat is a procedure. I feel like a lot of people. I feel like procedures. That combat procedure is one of the few procedures that is like fully gamified and left standing in 5e. In older versions of D&D, like there were other procedures that were sort of time based and stuff. And a lot of people like in the OSR and the NSR have like, described and created similar procedures and stuff. And I know we here at the table have also like kind of just invented procedures. Yeah, just like hacked some together because, we're really left wanting by 5e's sort of kind of like do whatever you want. And like the player's always right. And here you go. Here's a thing, I guess, in an adventure that we'll mention one time, but we won't kind of describe
saying we
very
did
well.
whatever we want?
What do you mean?
Because if we're creating it, we are doing whatever we want.
We're creating whatever we want, but like, we're like if you set up the procedure, then the player has an expectation, right?
It's sort of for people who are not really familiar with this sort of thing. In my mind, what I always think about is when you're hacking machines in BioShock and it brings up that little mini game and you know exactly what you're supposed to do and it's time limited and the environment is going to be shaped in some way by how you interact with it. Would you agree that that's like sort of a basic definition, that it is something that the player can expect is kind of fundamentally the same every time they try it, though it might be a little bit different based on circumstances, and will effectively alter the environment in which they're in or playing in? Yeah. Okay, cool. So we have a basic working definition. But I kind of like what you were saying, using combat as a way of like introing people into it, of like combat being the one that is essentially gamified and really built into the system because they expect, everyone's going to fight at least one thing in 5e. But does everyone have like an opinion about, other environmental procedures that are built into the game already, or is everyone sort of like, eh?
I don't think it's built into the game, but people kind of just like the one thing I think that a lot of people expect to do if you're out traveling is the night watch rotation, the perception checks. But that gets to be like there's a lot of other things you can do while traveling other than just keeping watch at night.
Yeah, the wilderness watch is something that people have kind of introduced and stuff. There is, I don't know, I have a lot to talk about with this subject. But like the sort of like breaking things down and like doing wilderness activities is like a whole thing that is also missing out of 5e. And I feel like a lot of times, when you do like a nighttime watch routine, it does kind of feel like the players don't know what the scaffolding is. Yeah. And I think that's really what a lot of it is. It's like reintroducing that scaffolding and trying to find other ways to make the players feel like they're making meaningful decisions. Yeah. Like if you're like, oh, I decide to hunt this watch or whatever. Like, if you can break down the day into watches and you can do like 4 or 6 watches or whatever. And it's like, okay, the activity I'm doing, like my character is doing this watch is we're hunting or we're searching or we're scouting or whatever. I'm fletching arrows or something. Or we're resting or something, or we're, trying to hunt down this bandit camp or something like that. Yeah. I think a lot of those can be nicely gamified in a way where players feel like they're making actual decisions.
I really want to touch on the gamification of it a little bit later, but first, Shay, do you also think that like the downtime activity is sort of an environmental procedure as well?
Absolutely. You know, it's going to vary from player to player, but any kind of downtime that you have, you know, sometimes you can hand wave it and just say, oh, okay,
time passes.
Yeah, you just do that. Time passes, you know, but if a character wants to develop a skill or kind of set something up for themselves in the future, you should have some structure to enable them to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Like if it's like, oh, you can make a certain amount of checks in order to get this ability or this skill set or whatever.
It also, I think, lets your players get more invested in your game if they know everyone knows that they can get invested in combat by, oh, I'm going to go and roll initiative and we're going to start this. But you also have other scaffoldings set up. Like, oh, I can do this or I can do this, that, or the other if I want to progress and get the game rewards. Because, you know, you're going to get experience if you fight. But what do you get if you go outside? Like, no one really kind of knows what to do because it's so loosely structured.
Yeah, for me, like I think for me the most successful environmental procedure that is built into a game that I've played is the apocalypse clock in Monster of the Week.
Ooh, yeah.
In which you build out at the beginning of when you're making your monster. If nobody interferes with the monsters doing whatever it's going to do, there's all the way from like daybreak, which is things are just starting to happen, all the way to midnight, which is like the world is over. And you build that clock so that as your players interact with stuff, and they're all kind of aware of it because it's like a basic fundamental thing of the game, they know that if they do not act to stop the monster in some way, things are going to get worse and worse and worse. And so that kind of feels like the most successful of the environmental clocks because it's almost, or environmental procedures, because they don't even have to be actively trying to interact with the procedure of it. They just have to know that it exists and are trying to act. They are trying to direct their actions in order to stop it. But like it's not something that is like a mechanic that they are futzing with. It's more
it's interesting. Background. I don't know if I would lump that in together or not. Like I'm just saying I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it is an interesting thing to think about, like of what parts of role-playing games do you gamify?
Yeah.
You know, like what parts of it are you like tracking or whatever. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite like mechanisms.
Yeah.
Like
totally.
in a game is because it really helps you like just figure out. It's very much like we were talking before about like faction play.
Yeah.
Like every faction can have a midnight clock,
yeah, exactly.
You know?
Like if they get dominance over the city or whatever, this is what happens. I think for me, the biggest thing about environmental procedures and homebrewing them and interacting with them is that I always am trying to gamify it to a point where people want to interact with it, but not gamify it enough that it becomes sort of like just math, like an Excel spreadsheet. Because like for me personally, I have a hard time getting excited about inventory management. I know some people really, really love it. I mean, even at our table, we have people who are just like, this is my thing. I love being able to like bookkeep in that way because it makes me feel invested in the world. But like, how do you guys go about making an environmental procedure that hits the sweet spot of it's part of the game, they can interact with it, it's like a game in of itself, but it's also not something that becomes too fiddly that it takes up too much brain space?
I wish I had an answer, but I'm still experimenting with a lot of that stuff.
I guess I want to say I'm not sure if I would think of like inventory management as like a procedure because you're not like, it's more just like there's like a bookkeeping mechanic that we kind of use sometimes. Like we used it in Daniel's game Dark Kingdom, where we were kind of keeping track day by day what we would spend money and rations on and stuff.
Yeah,
and that is more like a bookkeeping thing, which like you were saying is like can be kind of hand waved away as well.
So I'm glad that you said that because like then I think that what I really want to get out from you, because I don't really, I have a hard time with like the watch system because usually, in my experience, we've always tied that in with the bookkeeping of like we hunt for rations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, how would you create like an environmental procedure that they can interact with that isn't tied to the bookkeeping of it? I guess
like bookkeeping for like your inventory and like your supplies and stuff.
Supplies and all that kind of thing.
There is a thing that was created by Necropraxis, which is a blog that people should check out. It's pretty good. They put together this thing called the Overloaded Encounter Dice. So if you guys are familiar with the encounter die, you like roll a die during, you know, some kind of period of time, and then a random encounter happens on a 1. You know, you roll whatever D, you know, number or whatever, and on a 1 or on a 20 or some range of numbers, you encounter a wolf. But Necropraxis is like, what about those other numbers? And so the idea is basically like on a 1, you have your random encounter and you consult whatever random encounter table you have. On a 2, you know, you have like you have a trace of whatever monster is out there. You know, on a 3, I forget, but like on a 4 and a 5, I think like you have to expend a ration or something. And so that gets taken out of your inventory. You know, or I know like he's overloaded basically every type of procedure you can have. Like, so for example, the dungeon turn, which is another thing that was lost from, I think, the basic and expert rules of Dungeons and Dragons. It's basically every 10 minutes or some significant action or whatever, the characters do something. You roll 1d6, and on a 1, the monster appears. And then on a 5, your torch starts flickering, yeah. And then if it rolls again, your torch goes out. You need to light a new one. So it's kind of a way of hand waving bookkeeping. Not a lot of people like to use it, but there was a recent blog post by, I think, Goblin Punch, and he talked about using the D6 and then like sort of having like a stack of like 20. I was picturing them as like poker chips. Yeah, stack of like 20 poker chips, and then every D6 you remove that number until you get to the 0 or below 0, and then that's when the random encounter happens.
Oh, that's cool too.
And so the player is able to see how that thing kind of comes down.
Yeah. I also, Shade, so every year, dear listeners, we do like this PvP Battle Royale style game called the Icosahedrodome, which is run by our brilliant friend Shade here. And on the first year we did it, and subsequent years, you actually built like a lot of encounters into the running of that game, which is an environmental procedure. Can you talk a little bit about your process there?
Yeah. So they were called incident points. They were not always in the icosahedrodome, but in at least half or more of them they've been. You know, that was very simplistic. It was essentially you go to at the start of each round. We roll to see what incident point happens and where it occurs. So there are like indicated points on the battle map that, hey, this is an incident point area. And then I pull from a very large stack of cards, things that will either be a boon or a tragedy of some sort. I forget what I called them. Oh my God. What's the opposite of a boon?
Burst?
A curse? Detriment?
I don't know.
What did you say? A burst?
A burst?
Yeah,
a burst.
Or bust?
Or bust? Oh, a bust.
Anyway, I would do those. And I'm definitely just not looking at my notes real quick to see, because that's gonna bother me forever.
Did you think he said boom? Or
no,
boon.
No, boon.
I like boom. Yeah, boon and bunst or something like that.
Bunst?
Yeah.
Oh, I love a bunst roll.
Yeah, bunst roll.
Anyway, the threats, boon and threat. Anyway, and I had just kind of looking at this, like 24 threats, but I had repeats of them in these cards, and then I had many more boons because this was a PvP thing already, so there was already a threat on the field. And it could be something like healing. It could be a weapon that you can instantly attune to. It could be a displacer beast appears in the
It could
middle
be
of the
everyone
battlefield.
swapping health with the person on their left.
Yeah, that was one that I wanted for the first year, and it came up this year, and everyone was absolutely livid about it for a hot second.
Oh, just me.
No, yeah, there were some others that were a little.
But I was mad for the opposite reason.
Why?
I should have gotten more health.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Like if people could drop to 1, I could drop to 2. Just
No, I don't disagree with you at this point, but at the moment, I just wanted to keep us moving.
It's a game.
So yeah, it's a game.
So now we have a basic definition, some examples, and our kind of basic thoughts around it. I want to flip to an ad break, but then afterwards, I really want to delve into actually building them and also figuring out how you can use them in your game successfully. So we'll be back right after this break.
Hey, I'm Brando.
And I'm Owen.
And we're the hosts of Banter and Such.
Each week we get together with the most interesting people that we know and talk about the things that we're generally interested in.
Like movies,
TV shows,
movies,
nostalgic childhood franchises,
movies,
urban legends,
and sometimes movies.
So check out Banter and Such anywhere you get podcasts.
Banter & Such.
Or Banter and then the word and then Such.
Or just Banter and it fills in the rest automatically for you and you just click on it.
Either way, it's called Banter and Such.
Want to get into some BS with us?
Welcome back, everyone, to Tabletop. We're talking environmental procedures today and how to homebrew them. So we talked a little bit about what they are before the break. Now we're going to start talking about, the actual making of these procedures. One thing that I wanted to ask the crowd about was a lot of the examples we gave had a direct impact upon combat, either initiating it or inside of combat, like swinging the power balance. Combat being its own sort of mini game within the game of D&D, and the fact that we want to be a little bit more inclusive over the systems that we're kind of building these in, whether it be like an OSR game or a Powered by the Apocalypse or whatever. How do you build an environmental procedure that's like like fun to interact with, gamified, but also maybe not directly related to combat as an environmental procedure?
just like little things they can find in the environment that they could like perhaps use, such as like I want to say a gold mine, but something like, oh, they're exploring the environment. Oh, now they have found this gold mine, so now they have some wealth, and that can affect how they do things in town. And doesn't really have to be combat one way or the other, but it's like, oh, let's explore, and then we'll find stuff that will help us interact with things maybe a little bit easier. Or you find a sinkhole now. Oh, now we have a problem that's not combat related, but we have to climb out of this hole that we've just found ourselves in. So you could do stuff like that where it's not combat based, but it's still boons and bursts. Boons
and bursts.
You're trying to make this happen, man.
Boons and threats.
Boons and bust.
Yeah, I think it's important to have like sort of the potential of that threat. Like maybe it's not a combat encounter, maybe it's just a trap. Or maybe it's just like, there's a mudslide, or the sinkhole gets bigger and you start falling in, or something like that. Or
you're in a cave and like it's on the coast, so that as the tide
the water
comes in, it starts to like fill
I think one big factor of procedures is that time component.
Yeah.
Because like if man, I love the idea of a dungeon that is about to flood because of the cave.
Yeah.
That would be very fun.
Because it could be like there's something that they need or want in the dungeon, and it's hard to find, and so that's your time restraint.
Yeah.
It's like you have to get through here, and it will force them into encounters that maybe they would try to avoid or like, talk themselves to death about otherwise. But the dungeon's flooding. You only have a very short amount of time to be able to find this thing. You got to move, kind of thing.
Yeah, the analysis I think the analysis paralysis can be really broken up by randomized environmental threats. Like
that help force decisions.
yeah, because if you're rolling a d6 for every like 10-minute dungeon turn or whatever, where people are just spelunking, and on a 4 to 6 the waters rise, that's like, I think I've mathed it out to like 15 turns or something that you have to find the thing, I think at least or at most or something. It can get very, very dicey. Dicey.
I think you can also really abstract time more in that too.
Yes, absolutely.
Because one of the when I think 15 turns in a traditional like 5th edition thing, that's like, oh wow, that's only a couple minutes. Sorry.
So in sort of, I guess, the old style,
Correct,
it's like a round is the combat round, which is like 6 seconds. And then I think in old school essentials is like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And then a dungeon turn would be 10 minutes. Right. But you can definitely abstract that.
Which is,
yeah, which I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
It's not like exactly 10 minutes, exactly, et cetera, you know.
Yeah, absolutely where I was going, because I think that, having that real component of a clicking clock. Ticking clock.
A clicking clock.
Clicking clock.
Clicking talker.
Ticking talk.
Yeah, clicking talk. Yeah.
Yeah. We've all seen them.
A talk clogger.
A talk clogger. We're just in nonsense now. Thanks for listening. Anyway, just having that visual is always fun. Like, I really, that resonated with me about the chips going down. I love that idea.
I'm going to use that when I play test that game.
There's also, oh gosh, I had it a second ago, but this TTRPG that involves a Jenga tower.
Yeah.
And
I wish I could remember. I think it's not Fiasco.
No.
It's not Fate, is it?
That fills me with dread.
I think it's is it Dread? I think it's Dread.
Oh, really?
I think it might be called Dread.
Shoot, I think you're right, actually.
Oh, well, then it makes sense.
Genius. Daniel, you're a genius. What I was going to say is...
Yeah, it's Dread.
It's Dread. Oh, my God, Danny. You backed your way into that one.
So it does exactly what that's supposed to do.
Yeah. They nailed it.
But such a good, environmental system, because any number... And Tin Candles, another great environmental system, because... And dear listeners, I think I pleased half the group and upset the other half, because in that annual thing that I do, I also had a Tin Candles game, because I was like, yeah, let's fucking just really go wild here. And they blew out one of the candles at the beginning by mistake.
And by we, Sean did.
Yeah, it was Sean.
I don't know if it was Sean. It was one of the ones.
No, it was Sean. It was Sean. We all watched him do it.
All right.
Sorry.
He was trying to light up the candles all cool style.
Yeah,
and
he was
blew one out.
He was trying to do
Sean,
something.
we will never forget.
He was trying to do like a trick shot with the candle. He was like, whatever.
I felt so bad, so I did give everyone the choice, and they voted as a group to relight that candle.
I really wish we hadn't.
And I think maybe I shouldn't have.
It would have been more wild if we hadn't.
Yep.
It's going back to the environmental procedure homebrew of it all. I have talked to someone who loved 10 Candles and was like, I'm just going to use that as my own environmental procedure by saying all of you are cursed. This is like essentially the story arc we're going through. In this session, you all have this candle. If it goes out, you die because the curse is activated. Right. And so they all were given these little tea light to put in front of them, and they lit it. And then they had to get through and like stop this person who had cursed them, either by undoing the curse or by stopping the actual caster. And they had to do so with the tea light in front of them. And he said it was an amazing time, because like he saw all of the players start like covering the tea light and being like, "Don't get away from me! Like I have to keep this thing going." And so it was, and like they were making a lot more fast moves, because they're like, the wax is going down. Like I only have a little bit more time.
It's all about time.
Yeah.
Time pressure is essential.
Yep, it is a good one, and being able to visualize it is very important.
Yeah. Let's jump into actual building of them. So like, I think some of the tenets that we've already talked about that are so important is they have to have some sort of time component to them. I think not all of them have to, but I think it always helps, because it's like something
in
you
some
can
kind of
order
abstracted way.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
Like
it's
the Jenga tower isn't strictly right. Like I think Dread isn't strictly like time based, or even like 10 Candles, because like scene by scene could be like an hour, could be a day.
Absolutely.
It's more like I guess it's not even in-game time. It is sort of like play time that you're
kind of
a little bit
in those scenarios.
Yeah, and then I think another part of it, like it's not essential, but I think it really helps if there's a visual. Even when you were talking about the poker chips going down, I think that involves the players in a way that if you were just rolling behind a screen and being like, oh, and then everyone's like, what does that mean?
Well, in one sense, if you have sort of where you go, oh, in 3 days this is going to happen, everyone's going to be like, oh, they're going to play the game. Mm-hmm. But if you put like that, oh, you have 3 days, and you put a big clock behind you with like 3 circles.
I did that once with
and everyone, they don't forget that 3 days exist. It keeps it on the
it's
forefront.
Like in Majora's Mask, where the moon is just getting closer and closer, and everyone's like, that fucking moon.
Well, I would also recommend if you have like a hidden thing like that, which is something that is going to be in the playtest that I do soon. But I'm just going to have a stack of poker chips and start decrementing them every time something happens, and then the players won't know until they know suddenly. You know.
Also, if you're just a monster of a person and you don't actually have a system, but you want to stress out your players, do that.
Yeah, you can just do that. Exactly.
But what else do you think it needs? So like a visual component's helpful, something that like feels like it is ordered in some way, like it marks the passing of time or it marks the passing of energy, or like the dwindling of a resource is important.
Yes.
What else is like really useful?
Player choice.
Player choice?
They need to know what's going to start this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know how to initiate whatever it is you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that it becomes a choice of, we're going to get involved in this
procedure.
now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
And of course, how to complete it. Like they need to have a clear.
They need to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
There's a really fun procedure, and I wrote it down on the list. It's a Telecanter's lockpicking procedure.
Yeah.
It's very fun, and it's a good way to sort of, I don't know, you're proceduralizing lockpicking, and you're also kind of putting in the learning of lockpicking as well. So the lockpicking procedure begins by the player deciding that they're going to pick a lock, and they have 3 actions. I think it varies, but I've used rake, tap, and prod, something like that. Yeah. Doesn't matter. It just has to be 3 of them, and you have to do them in the right order in order to unlock the lock. And it's always like 3 tumblers. Yeah. And the thing that the players know is that if it's never 2 in a row of the same, and then they also know that every lock type opens the same way. So
they could like write it down and be like, this is this type.
And that's how they learn how to lockpick.
Oh, so that like represents them getting better at that skill. That's
Correct.
really cool.
And then a way to kind of like, you kind of stymie them by if you get the sequence wrong, it gets stiff. And then if you fail on a stiff lock, it jams and you have to break it open. And so that way it's like you end up not being able to learn what that lock, like you can say it's like an iron lock or a diamond lock or whatever. And it's basically like as a GM, you just create 12 different lock types.
But it also allows your players to feel like even a failure is a success, because you can be like, oh, it's jammed. I know now that in a diamond lock, the first one is a rake and the second one is a poke, and I kind of know what the last one is now too, because they can't repeat, so there's only 2 options, right?
Yeah. So the next time they find that lock, they know how to pick it.
50-50 chance, whatever. That's a really cool little idea. I like the idea that you can build these procedures to be easily overcome after experience as well, so that it becomes a way for the players to feel like a power, like a exponential power raise or whatever.
Just like real life's supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You learn through failure and trying. Yeah. And I think that's one of the systems that I've stumbled on that is like probably, I don't know, it's very clean.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that in like a Powered by the Apocalypse game, that would be kind of perfect. I really like that.
Yeah.
I might steal it.
Yeah, it's funny because it kind of exists outside of a lot of systems too, because you can just plug it into anything. And what you could do too is I've seen a few people kind of talk about like using a skill check to like try to see if you could get the first one.
Yeah.
And then just doing things based on that. I also like the idea of like, I don't know, like when you do things, it should cost something. Like when you, like if you make that roll and you fail on it, then it takes up time. Another turn passes, you roll a d6, you might have an encounter.
Poker chips away.
Yeah, you take the poker chips away or whatever.
So it kind of does feel like environmental procedures act best when they are stacked with each other in some ways, where if you make like 4 procedures that are going to be meshing with each other within a dungeon, then you have like a pretty complex, interesting dungeon, even if it's only 5 rooms in a straight line. You know what I mean? Like you can have different types of locks on them and have the lock picking procedure, but also the dungeon's flooding, and as I take away these poker chips, it's starting to flood more or whatever. So like you can have some interesting ones, so like stacking them can always be, you just have to make sure that they mesh together.
Right. Really, really dumb. But I think if you're going to do a time track tracker for a dungeon flooding, it should be a glass of water.
Oh, and
Oh
you
my
fill it
God.
up. I do say, like, there is a part of the procedures that's like artistry or creativity in the presentation of it. Also can go from something that the players are like, oh, okay, I get it, to like, oh my God, this is fucking crazy. Like the candle of like, this thing is so fragile. It can blow out at any moment, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, what if the water thing is like you have a glass, but every time that it has to fill, like a player has to do the filling. And so like you pass it around. And so like you tell them like, okay, you have to fill it for 3 seconds or 2 seconds or something like that. But then everyone's going to start pouring it in a different way.
Yeah.
Like even the GM could pour it in a different way as well. But if it's on the player to do it.
But it also could be like you go around the table, so it's all the players, but they know on turn 4 the GM is going to pour, and maybe that's going to be a heavy pour round. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
And you're abstracting time, and time is different for every different person. But then at the end, it's like 1, 2, 3, and everyone's like, "No, why did you do that?"
It's like when you have to pour it, you have to roll a d4 to pour.
Oh,
it's
and
like that's how many seconds.
That could be cool.
Yeah,
I think that the amount of time, like, because I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I hate tracking time in TTRPGs. I never find a really good way to do it consistently. And a lot of times I'm just like, okay, guys, 30 minutes have passed. What do you want to do kind of thing. I think that this is a really fun way of making the passing of time both understandable and like consistent. And it makes it so that like it's not only understood, but it is also fun. And that's the big thing, is making these things fun.
Abstracting time is I don't know. I highly recommend
important.
it. I think also because then you will come across players, and a lot of these players are my friends and I like them, but yeah, they get very persnickety about time passage, right?
Yeah.
Like they'll be like, "Oh, it wouldn't take 10 minutes to do that, would it?"
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, sure.
Yeah. I mean, it happened. I mean, I think that story-based games like some Powered by the Apocalypse and some other like 2D6 system kind of thing, it really struggles with that, because it can be like, you have to get across town, but the sun is getting low, and everyone's like, but it only takes like, how long could it take for us to run across town or whatever? And it's like,
I don't know, fuck.
Yo, shit.
Oh, shit.
I guess it's not 6 o'clock, it's 8 o'clock.
That's why the hexes are as big as it takes to traverse across it a half a day.
Yeah.
And not 6 miles.
And I think that is like a really good use of procedures, is to like abstract time and like make it more gamified and fun and consistent. But we have on the list here like downtime activities. I find downtime activities very hard for me, again, to track if it's not made into like an interesting gamified way, because otherwise it's like, okay, what do you guys want to do? And it's like spending a resource. So it's kind of like a shopping episode almost.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about downtime stuff?
I have recently used one, but everyone else can go first.
I think it should be part of the game.
Yeah.
Be like, okay, we're doing like when we all log in about 7 o'clock when we do our games, and there's like 15 minutes of everyone saying hi and logging in. And then you say, okay, let's start the game.
Socializing and shit.
That should be, okay, what have you done since what's the time pass? What's your downtime portion? And then get into the game and keep it kind of separate. So that's like we're doing this, everyone can focus, everyone kind of knows what's going on, and then boom, now we're switching, now we're role playing, and we're getting back into that.
Shit.
I mean, I think that downtime. So I loved Lunar Interludes from the Adventure Zone. That was there in the first arc.
It's nice RP.
Arc. It's a nice RP.
Yeah.
I mean, they did
That's
some
why I
downtime
completely
activities there
stole it
too.
for Lakewood.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I think downtime activities, as far as encoding them as a system, they really there should be something for them to do, some kind of skill check, some kind of challenge,
Some kind of Best Buy to rob.
yeah. But I'm fine with like a downtime episode in full.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, honestly, like when we did it, what I would build, it wasn't really a procedure, but I would essentially say each of you gets to pick one sort of social interaction you want to play out with an NPC that you're interested in, with a location, with like a thing that has come up. And sometimes that was, I want to get this sword silvered. Okay, well, there's a blacksmith out of town that you could go talk to, and that became a social interaction. Or it was like, I want to throw a sleepover for these people who have been through a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And so like different things like that kind of became part of the game as well. I've also always wanted to, I have yet to do so, but I'm excited to someday do it still. I've always wanted to make catering a downtime activity where like it's procedurally made and like you had to do different things to like get like the outcome.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, I just think it'd be fun in that and maybe this dovetails into the next thing after we talk about yours as well, Franco, but like I always like something that affects other parts of the game. So like my catering idea always would affect a combat thing afterwards.
Interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so and I won't go too much into detail because I do eventually want to run it for you guys. But Franco, you were saying that you have one. What
I recently ran this because my players had recently come into a shit ton of money after kidnapping the Archbishop. Good job, guys. And they had like 5,000 GP each, and they were like, we want to like build a school. Like they wanted to build like an academy or something like that. And then the other one wanted to build like a vampire nightclub underneath the academy because she just became a vampire. But I just reskinned it as a Dampier because vampires are OP. And so I used the book on downtime and domains by Courtney Campbell, which is a pretty fun book full of a lot of different types of tables. And the downtime procedure I used is adapted from, again, Necropraxis has a similar overloaded hazard die for downtime activities. And so like on 1, you run into an interesting NPC. On a like 4 or 5 or something like that, like a faction does something. Like I think on like a 2, like some calamity happens, like an army attacks the city, or like there's a plague or some crazy shit happens, and it inflicts these conditions, which I've also gamified, you know, like if like prices go up, or you know, people are suspicious of people or whatever, and so it's harder to get things done or whatever. And then I just had them do like one thing or another thing or whatever. Yeah. A lot of times downtime was used to, or is still used to level up. Because if you're like, oh, I'm going to spend like a downtime cycle, which can be anywhere between like a month or a week or something, and I'm going to use it to train, or I'm going to use it to like study or whatever. And then that's how you like sort of in the fiction determine in the fiction like justify leveling up and becoming better at stuff. Because I think that
gave me an idea. It'd be really fun going back to our everything is anime sort of thing of like I spend this entire like month of downtime practicing just like unsheathing my blade and striking, and then you're like, okay, at the end of this, for the next adventure, you're gonna have True Strike on your first like attack because you're like, I can get this out of the sheath quickly and accurately that like True Strike.
That sounds like a really cool like little feat or something. That would be very fun. Yeah. I like that.
Good job.
Hey,
you did it.
But yeah, downtime can be the other thing I did at the end of every downtime turn was roll a d6 for every faction in play, and based on the roll, I would increment their progress to a certain goal.
That's cool.
They have, yeah. So that's kind of how I used it. I think at some point I would love to run like a Western Marches style campaign where basically like you just have like a world and the players are just playing in it, and then so like at the end of every session you have to be back in town or something, because a lot of times, you know, we'll be like in the middle, like we'll end the session and we'll be like, we're right about to go into a combat, or well, in the session we're right about to do this, which is great. But I think I like the idea of like that always makes it feel like we've been hanging out in this 3 weeks of span of time for the past year.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're just like, I'm going to do one adventure, and then like time passes in real time or whatever, and then you just, you know, sort of hand wave a lot of downtime stuff, and then you get right back into it. And it feels, I don't know, it just feels more like real-timey, which I think could be fun.
Yeah. And that is a tricky thing, I think, with a lot of 5e. It doesn't have that West March feel. You know, it's dense. Even if you're running out of the books, it's just like, oh yeah, no, this much time might pass between things, but those are chapters. Within a single chapter, it's like a single day.
Yeah. Right.
Times.
Yeah, I think that that's important too, because depending on the story you want to tell, or like if you're making a more narrative-based campaign, like you're trying to bring them through like several scenes or whatever, sometimes that might not work. But I think that you're right that it does provide a feel of like a bit more of a longer time scale campaign where it can be like, you as characters have been out adventuring for a year now. Like, that's cool. Yeah, like you guys are different people now. One last thing about environmental procedures before we close out here. I want to kind of talk, because I think that the way that they should be used to, like, they just should always be used, honestly, is to make some sort of procedure during combat that is affecting the environment around them, just to make combat more interesting.
Ooh, yeah. like at the end of every round, like something like a layer action, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But like it could be like the waters rise.
Yeah.
The lava from that one.
Oh, that was mine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the big disc that you guys were on, and depending on where you were standing on the disc, at the end, it would start tilting into the lava.
Oh, yeah.
And so you guys had to like either balance yourselves out, or you had to like just keep moving.
Okay.
Not actually the one I was thinking about, but that is a great example too. No, that is really fun. But I was also thinking in the Dark Kingdom arc, we were fighting against Warmonger. And he had his mech suit, and we were in like the middle of a volcano.
Oh,
and
yeah.
lava was slowly encroaching,
was rising, and the floor was falling away.
Yeah.
I just think that anytime you can put an environmental procedure into combat, not only does it make it more interesting, because combat can be a slog, it also does that thing of abstracting time of like, guys, you got to make your decision because the disc is tilting or whatever, the magma is rising.
It's like, I think like Matt Colville has those, I forget what the monsters are called, but like he has it that way. Huh?
Doesn't he work with kobolds usually?
No, not the kobold thing, but it was like a type of monster where like on this turn the monster's going to burrow, on this turn it's going to do this, and then on the third turn it's going to do that or whatever.
Yeah.
It's sort of like more like cinematic, I guess, like a way of play. But I think
like
that
you could have a purple worm like explode out from underground, and it like attacks, but it also then burrows onto the ground, and you can't attack it for a turn, allowing them to like strategically place themselves or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that all of those are great examples.
Playing with the battlefield.
Yeah, if people are interested in doing that, I would always suggest saying your environmental procedure should obstruct, delay, and make things generally more difficult. It should not be like, this is going to kill you.
Yeah.
Like the lava thing, I think, was good because it always came at the end of a round so that we knew where, like going back to our kind of tenets of a procedure, all of us playing knew, if I stay here, lava is going to go over my knees and I will be in the lava.
You must telegraph the danger.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not meant to like actively kill or harm your players. It is providing a danger so that they have to be more intentional and play more interestingly, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I
guess if we're wrapping up, I do want to give a plug for a book that I think it's very good. It's touted as a procedure heavy, rules light, I think is what she calls it. Ava Islam's Errant. It's a full like game on its own, but it is chock full of different procedures, including the lockpicking procedure I mentioned before, because rules can't be copyrighted, and everyone in the OSAR is very giving with their Creative Commons content.
Wait, I don't think I heard you the first time. What was that one called? Who's it by?
Oh, it's called Errant by Ava Islam.
Yeah, everyone. I'll try to get that in the show notes as well, so that people can go check it out.
It's really good. You can get the no art version for free, or you can get the full art version for money. But it's a great book.
Cool. Anyone else have anything that they want to plug? Anything that they are doing that they want to promote? Anything else before we end?
Be a good person.
Yeah, everyone
do good things.
Try it out for once.
Yeah, just for one.
But no,
goddamn
we know you're
second.
already good people because you're listening, right?
I was doing a comedy show the other day, and it was for charity. And the guy who was running it came up and said, "Hey, if anyone would like to donate, they can put some money in this little cup here. And if you don't, you're a bad person. So let's not do that for once in your life."
Holy shit!
And with that, everyone, we are going to close close out, but did you know that Tabletop is part of the Helios Network? You might be asking, what is the Helios Network? Well, it is a podcast network where people make podcasts for regular people like you and I. There's a ton of really cool stuff on there, like Master and Debaters, which is a podcast where people discuss ferociously and debate about the stupidest things ever. I would definitely suggest going to give it a try. Everyone else, if you want to get in touch with us, you can go to tabletoppod.com, go down to the submit a question form, and you can write us anything. We'll read it. And if it's interesting and, something that you want aired, we can put it into a podcast at some point where we talk about your questions. Everybody else, have a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.